How's it going, people of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Welcome to my Loki Episode 3 recap, review, and breakdown. And this episode is titled Lamentis. Now, this episode is fairly interesting, seeing the responses from people online, because there's lots of opposing opinions about this. Some people say this was a waste of time, it was a very fillery episode, while some even say that that was their favorite episode. Now, where I stand is that I was very thoroughly entertained, don't get me wrong. There was lots of action in it. We got to see, finally, for the longest time, even though technically this happened at the end of last week's episode, who this Lady Loki variant is, and also there was a revelation, I suppose, in terms of if this is even Lady Loki or another character entirely that fans were speculating about. And there was one other revelation, I suppose you could say, but I think this is where I have to, play devil's advocate, split myself right in the middle here and see both sides of the fence. Or while I was very entertained, while a lot happened in this episode, a lot also didn't happen in this episode in terms of stuff that really pushes the plot progression forward. Because if you think about it, other than, I leaned more towards Lady Loki anyway. That's why I was still calling her Lady Loki in my last week's review, even though there was comments saying that's not Lady Loki, that's Enchantress and stuff. Put that aside, the only other thing we learned is that little teaser about the TVA, which is something I was questioning this whole time anyway, when we had Mobius talking about everyone there being created. I was like, what? So you're telling me the Timekeepers birthed them? I was always suspicious about that one, but let's go ahead and talk about this episode in a little bit more detail. Like this video if you do go on to enjoy it, of course, and subscribe for more videos like this. So the beginning of this episode picked up with Sylvie, or Lady Loki if you will. I guess we're going to kind of keep calling her Lady Loki for some time, because technically she is, even though she doesn't like being called that, because she is not that person anymore, as we learn in this episode, which I guess settled that debate amongst fans. That beginning scene was really Lady Loki trying to infiltrate C-23's mind with a very, very early memory, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, because I have a bit of speculation and theories as to that, I guess, one of, if not the only, revelations we had in this episode. And we also learned that Lady Loki managed to extract the information from her in terms of what was it exactly that C-23 said to Lady Loki when she said she gave away how to find the Timekeepers. That is through the golden elevators. So those golden elevators, that was practically all we saw of them this episode, and I guess we'll get onto that in a second, but I guess they just literally go up to the grand council room of the Timekeepers. I feel like that's going to be a very interesting moment to come. Is there even anyone in there? Is there just one Timekeeper? Are they all Lokis like people were thinking? Turns out right at the end of last episode, when she opened a time door and Lady Loki went through it, and then we had our Loki go through it, well, they just popped up in the TVA, and whilst everyone is distracted with all the time bombs scattered throughout different dates, branching off into different timelines, it was a crazy mess, as we all know, at the end of last episode. She very interestingly knew where to go. I thought that was a detail that was quite important to kind of note here in this video. She started walking and navigating her way throughout the TVA to find those golden doors, albeit they never went through the golden elevator doors and stuff. She knew where to go. So with that, paired with a couple of other clues in this episode that I really want to get to in this video, such as the comments to Loki saying, oh, only running from the TVA my whole entire life, well, that to me opens up another massive clue in how, okay, they're not only after her apparently for her ambushing TVA Minutemen and stealing their time bombs, well, it seems that they've been after her for a whole lot longer than what the TVA was letting on. But we'll revisit this a little bit more later. I just thought that was interesting to note right now. But one thing that kind of goes against my little theory there in terms of, well, as we saw Lady Loki, aka Sylvie, just going exactly where she wanted to go in the TVA, which suggests she knew where she was going. Well, she also tried to use her enchantment magic on a guard, and she was kind of surprised when it didn't work. So that suggests to me that she didn't know that magic doesn't work there. So has she been in the TVA before? Do you know what I'm trying to say? That there's a thing that suggests she did know where she was going, so she's been there before. But if you don't know that magic doesn't work there, then have you really? That's something I just guess we have to ponder about, but we might learn a little bit more later on. I thought the action was pretty sweet in that corridor fight scene. So from here on out, it's very few and far between that there's any substance in terms of the overall plot. Now, I'm not complaining here, because I would say that Disney Plus series so far, the Marvel series, have been very plot-oriented. Like, there's not too many episodes, everything is very engaging, and it doesn't really matter too much if there's a bit of filler, like this episode. And yes, I would go as far to say that there was a lot of it, but it did have the opportunity to explore many different things that I was thoroughly entertained by. For example, there's a lot of action in this. We got to see how the dynamic between these two variant Lokis worked, so I enjoyed all of that, but I do see people's opinions, as I prefaced at the beginning of this breakdown, that apart from what I'm about to mention with the key bits of information that we did learn that do contribute to the grand overarching kind of plot here, it was just a bit of brotherly sister squabbling every now and again and action. That was mainly it. So I do get how some people felt like, okay, this was, I guess, a bridging episode, and I think that's the way to personify it. This episode, in of itself, bridges the previous episode to the next episode, which is aka kind of fillery. But as I want to stress though, filler isn't always bad. It really isn't. It becomes bad, for example, in a network CW season. It's the best way for me to put it, because it's the easiest example, but I know some CW fans get really annoyed when I do this. But as I said, the CW personifies filler. There's so many episodes in a season, usually like 22, and there's often too much filler. That's when it becomes bad, because it spreads the main plot engagement way too thin. Like spreading a minuscule amount of butter way too thinly over a massive, broad piece of toast. It's not going to complete it, is it? So it's the same thing there. And with this, it's not so bad, because I'm guessing that this is the only episode, considering we don't have many episodes. But I think people expected some grand things to happen in this episode, considering we actually got Lady Loki unmasked, so to speak, for the whole duration of the episode, but really, there's only 1 or 2 revelations obtained. So the whole episode from here on out surrounded the TemPad getting charged. Initially, it was kind of like, hey, like, give it to me. You don't even know how to charge this. Well, you're not the only tech-savvy Loki. And she's like, no, don't ever call me that. Obviously, she's left the Loki name behind, and she's now called Sylvie, and it's just an alias, and we don't quite know. This is what I think they should have got into. We did, even in this episode where there wasn't massive plot advancements, they could have dived into the backstory of her here. I know we're going to get into that. Obviously, we're going to learn why she took on an alias, why she disregards the name Loki. I just felt like they could have done it here. Whilst they're trying to charge the TemPad to open a new time door, well, there's literally an apocalyptic event happening, because we can't forget that the TemPad was programmed to take Lady Loki to all of these apocalypses. And this happened to be the worst one of them all, because, yeah, nobody makes it off this planet, because the moon above the planet is about to crash into it and destroy it. So other dialogue that we got that I think could be fairly crucial to kind of note down, she does say that the plan you interrupted was years in the making. As soon as I turn that TemPad back on, I'm going straight back to the TVA to finish what I started. So yet again, pair this with the information of how she says that she's been running from the TVA her entire life. Well, this plan was years in the making. So as I said, this suggests that this isn't just about her ambushing the Minutemen. That's been sold to the audience since episode 1. It was presented to us like she was just up to a bunch of mischief, collecting time bombs, what was a grand plan. But no, it seems like she wants some kind of revenge or vengeance on the TVA for something, and that for some reason they have been after her for a lot longer than what they've been letting on to Loki, or at least what Mobius has. Now, throughout their travels, they learn from a lady who blasted both of them back. In a little bit of comedic moments scattered throughout the episode, they hear about the Ark, the evacuation vessel, which never actually makes it off, but they eventually come to the idea of, well, they've never had 2 Lokis before, so let's try and save it ourselves. But that doesn't exactly end up well either. And the reason why I feel like I'm just cutting to the chase so much in this, like, I feel like we're almost at the end of the episode points, because that's all like really kind of happened, if you know what I mean. Not that I didn't enjoy it, but as far as I keep saying, plot, substance stuff, it was just arguing, banter, all some connecting moments. I enjoyed that, don't get me wrong, I really did. But yeah, as far as actual breakdown stuff, you see why a lot of people are saying what they're saying. Now, when both Lokis were in that bar and they started connecting, as I kind of teased just then, they were speaking about Loki's mother, our Loki variant's mother, with how she was a queen of Asgard, good, purely decent. And that's when it was revealed, just to solidify the theories of her not being a Loki, and that she definitely is, because she also was adopted as well, because she insinuated that she knew about it for a lot longer than what our Loki did. He found out about it in the MCU very late, which obviously contributed to the events of that Loki going down the path that he did within the MCU films. However, it seems that Lady Loki's mother may have died a lot earlier than our variant's Loki did, because she says that she barely remembers her, whereas our Loki has very fond memories of her, and he did obviously learn through the TVA that she eventually dies because it's something that he inadvertently led the men to her. But obviously it didn't happen with him because he wasn't quite the Loki who did it. This is getting a bit trippy with my articulation. But yeah, we're getting little clues into her backstory, but obviously we don't have the full picture, but I'm sure that's going to be dived into in another episode. When talking about who they've been with, they dive into their sexuality a little bit. I'm pretty sure it parallels for both of them, because Loki said prince or princess, a bit of both, but I expect the same as you, but nothing ever real, really, just insinuating that they've never really been in love. They haven't had that substance, even though they've been in plenty of relationships. I liked the bit as well. It was kind of random, but it was just, I don't know, it's kind of Norse mythology-esque, if you know what I mean, when how he was singing in Asgardian, and we had the Lady Loki. She seemed a little bit emotional in that moment. I feel like maybe she recognizes that song that our Loki was singing. By the way, another action scene. Once again, I really enjoyed the action in this episode. I believe the choreography was decent, but it might be one of those things when you watch it again, you notice someone just standing there and then doing the punch when they could have punched the whole time. But as far as face value, I thought it was great. They both get thrown off the train, the temp pad gets destroyed, so this is when they really think, okay, we're gonna have to pilot the little escapee kind of arc vessel. Now, this is when I think the biggest takeaway happens in the episode. The biggest thing, even though I feel like I was on the ball of this anyway, I feel like I made a big point out of it in my previous breakdowns, but I still didn't know what the heck was going on because we didn't have the answers. And this is when Lady Loki explains how she got the answers out of C-23 and how enchantment works. She needs physical contact and how that grabs a hold of their mind. And so in order to preserve that connection, she needs to create a fantasy from their memories. And that young soldier from the TVA, she explains how her mind was messed up, everything was clouded, so she had to pull a memory from hundreds of years prior, before she even worked for them, which is very interesting to not only Loki but us, because it's like, well, we thought they were created by the TVA. Loki is like, what? I was told everyone who works for the TVA was created by the Timekeepers, but she was just an ordinary person from Earth before working for the TVA. And Lady Loki says that's ridiculous because they're all variants just like us. So everyone in the TVA is a variant, including Mobius himself, everyone, but that's when Loki implies that they're not aware of it, which is super interesting because it makes me think in the first episode, you know, when they go through all that stuff and then they go for it, get the ticket, and the overseeing judge says if they're guilty or not guilty. Is that how if they're not guilty, they go on to become an analyst for the TVA maybe? Or is that got nothing to do with that, and the Timekeepers are the ones who dictate who can be variants in the TVA? Because this is also quite fascinating in of itself, because if they're all variants, and that's kind of dodgy, is it not, that the Timekeepers allow that to happen, because variants even existing can be problematic, but I'm guessing once they're removed and they're working for the TVA, they're no longer a threat to creating a red line or a, you know, extinction level multiversal collapse or whatever Miss Minutes teased, with obviously a red line coming to fruition. And honestly, guys, just on my bullet points, other than that, you know, the apocalypse is full in swing, the meteorites are coming full swing, the arc gets blown up, and it just ends there. I mean, there was cool moments leading up to the arc. I don't know if the CGI was a bit dodgy in places. Did anyone else notice that? I'm not one of those people who are like, CGI, look at that CGI. But I just thought, like, maybe it was really overambitious for that episode with the amount of stuff that was going on. I found it really entertaining, though, with how Loki was just, like, using his magic to stop things, basically like the Force, trying to stop them from being crushed. But I don't know, I felt like it wasn't actually as climactic as I feel like they were trying to get across at that very end of the episode. I feel like, you know, the arc blew up and then it just ended. And I was like, oh, it ended there? That was my first reaction, honestly. Now, I don't feel like I'm being as harsh on this as some other people are just literally calling it a waste of time. I don't agree with that. I don't see how something like this is a waste of time when, you know, it's clearly entertaining and there was lots of other things to take out of it. But as far as plot progression, to not repeat myself anymore, really not anything, if at all, maybe one or two things, excuse my phone noise there, happened. You know, as I said, other than the Timekeeper revelation, if you already kind of vibed that Lady Loki was Lady Loki and not Enchantress, well, that wasn't a massive surprise. And there was a couple of other details, but they were minor. So as for this episode, I call it a bridge episode. Maybe what others would call a filler. I wish they would have at the very least chucked in a few more juicy things. I feel like that would have really leveled this episode out for those who are really calling this out for not really being that interesting. But what did you guys think of this? Let me know down in the comments below. I feel like there's something I'm forgetting or something I feel like I need to dive into more, but we just still don't have all the answers. Like, we still have yet to dive into Lady Loki's backstory. We know she's a Lady Loki and not another character. As I mentioned earlier, when Loki asked when did she get so paranoid, she said, I guess it must have started when I spent my entire life running from the omniscient fascists that you work for. Why would the Timekeepers be so adamant to go after a Lady Loki variant for her entire life? Unless they feared something from her. So does that pertain to the Timekeepers being Loki's, fearing that other Lokis are gonna... I don't know. There's a lot of ambiguity here still. So that, you know, those parts were the fascinating parts of this episode. But other than that, we still have a lot more to go. As far as Sophia Di Martino and her Lady Loki, I'm enjoying it, I guess, you know, the dynamic. I'm not completely sold on it just yet. I felt like there was quite, you know, obviously they're the same person, so it was kind of meant to deliberately be brotherly and sisterly squabbles this episode, but I don't know. I think I was a little bit underwhelmed, like a lot of people, with how I expected a bit more grand things to happen this episode. At least one more thing. I think that's the thing that was missing, but I'm going to shut up now. Let me know your thoughts and theories, your opinions on my opinions, expand upon them. Maybe there was something I missed, but I feel like I didn't because there wasn't too much else in this episode. Like it if you did enjoy this video. Subscribe if you're not subscribed, because I believe over 60% of you who watch my videos aren't subscribed. So subscribe, or create a YouTube account if you're not even watching on a YouTube account to subscribe. Other than that, links are in a top pinned comment to my social media, Discord server, and other places to support me. But thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you people of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the next video. Goodbye.